That was indigestion. Good morning. Good to see you this morning. Or turn it down just a little bit. I feel like I'm standing in a hole. Oh, I am. Been there all my life. Do you like the decorations that I did for you this morning? Are they good? Yeah. If you think I did that, hold your breath. No, after we finish, I did all the artwork over there as well. There's a children's ministry event in here after the last service. I think it starts around 12:30 or 1 o'clock. So they asked if they could kind of decorate and get ready so they could be ahead. And I said, of course. So I could have told you that it's a birthday celebration, because Journey class is 2 years old today. And then most importantly, my birthday is Tuesday, and I'm taking all cards, letters, gift cards, anything and everything that you have to offer, I'll be 43 in line on Tuesday. But that is true. My birthday is 8/8, and my wife's birthday, interesting, is 9/9. And we had 4 children: 7/7, 4/4, 5/5. I'm kidding. Here's we go. But yeah, my birthday is Tuesday. Big number 67. 67. But doing good. Hey, I missed you last week, but I got to speak to most of you. I guess that you were in there. Okay. Hey, listen. Let me remind you. Go to the next slide, Mark. Really trying to establish a Facebook presence. It says, and I don't really know the difference, but I met with our social media guru in the office on Thursday for a while, and his recommendation was that we keep the Facebook page, which we have. Is Robert in here today? No, he's not here. But we have added to that, and I'll use that term add because I'm not very good with the terminology, Facebook group. That ring a bell? That doesn't with me. He said, you need a Facebook group. So we kept the page and added a Facebook group. It's an open group. And so he said that was the best way for us to go. So that's what we have done. I don't know how much difference it'll make, but if you're not a part of that, go join. Especially you can join the page and the group, but please do both of those. Okay? All right. We have any first timers? Oh, okay. Were you in the service last week? Which service? 8:30? Those of you know me, that one of my patent phrases for 30 plus years is the sin sick, shriveled up soul. Okay? Well, we have 2 that made it this morning from that statement last week. Right here. Okay? So it's worth it. It's worth it. Okay? To embarrass people. We're glad, ladies, we're glad to have you here. I think private schools largely start this week, and then public schools the next. So frankly, we've had a really strong summer in here, but I think we'll pick up more and more folks in the next 2 to 4 weeks as folks get back in normal pattern of life. So as always, make room at your table. I can't guarantee folks will end up at your number table and make them feel welcome. Okay. All right. We've been in. Take your listening guide. We have been in Matthew 10 for several weeks, looking at the demands of discipleship from the teaching ministry of Jesus. And Matthew 10 is the most consolidated portion where Jesus talks about, here's what I expect and exact and challenge for those men and women who want to follow me. And it's very hard information. Very difficult information. In fact, if we look at Matthew chapter 10, he begins in verses 24 and 25, having talked about the price you will have to pay, as it were, to follow him in the previous 8 or 9 verses. I'll pick up because I just was out last week and I want to get continuity. The disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It's enough, Matthew 10:25. It's enough, it's sufficient to be like his teacher and a servant like his master. If they call the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more will they malign those of his household? And that's the overarching expectation of Jesus. Be like the teacher. Be like the Master. Become as much like Him as possible. Jesus told Zacchaeus, and those who heard, you may remember Luke 19, that one of the reasons the Son of Man came, and there were many, was to seek and to save lost. You and I are in this room, relationship with Christ, because Jesus came as someone, whether it was parents or friends or pastors or teachers, family members, somewhere along the way, introduced you to Christ. And you said yes. And you moved from lost to found. It's happened to, I'm going to presume, to all of us in the room. And if we're going to be like Jesus, that's a trait that you and I have to pick up on. I began to look, in fact, I wrote it down. I just started writing a long list. Have you ever kind of looked back maybe weeks or months, maybe years, and realized looking back that God had been trying to tell you something? And you just either weren't tuned in or life was so busy you just didn't grasp it. I look back this week and I made that discovery for me in my journey with the Lord. Let me just recount some things that have happened. One was this series. I love to study and love to teach. The hardest decision for me is always, what's the next series? What do we do next? That's always the most difficult. And over the time I was out with the hip replacement, I asked you to pray for me about several things, and I ended up in this one. And really after the first week or two, I struggled. I thought, Jimmy, maybe you picked the wrong one. I don't know about you, but sometimes I question the decisions that I make. All right, maybe I missed it. And but I was already into it, so I couldn't quit. And then we began to walk through these demands and being like Him, and then being unafraid of the world that comes against us. I think the more outspoken we are about our relationship with Christ, and the more godly and holy we are in our living, is intimidating to a lost world, and they can come after us, especially in our culture right now. And we talked about being unafraid of the world, not to fear the world. And then right out of that, the next two verses, to be unashamed of the Lord, that we must be willing to confess Him, acknowledge Him before people, and He will acknowledge us before the Father. But those last two were about being willing not to be afraid and being willing to speak up for Christ. And then David preached on the parable of soils 3 or 4 weeks ago, which is all about the issue is the seed, but what God said to me was, how much of a sower are you? I mean, how intentional and deliberate are you in just sowing the seed when there's an opportunity? So that was kind of coupled. And then last week's message, picking up with the next 3 parables out of Mark chapter 4, was really all about the kingdom of God and the growth of the kingdom of God, but it began with, be sure that you're shining the light, which is just another metaphor for sowing the seed and get the word out. And so I had all of that prayer and preparation for that. And then staff-wise, we've been in just some discussion. It's a good discussion every now and then. Who are we and why are we here, and who is our audience? Who is our audience? I mean, are we a church that's based on Luke 15 that's concerned about the sheep that wanders away and we go after them? Or are we more concerned about the 99 that are in the fold? Evangelists are concerned about both. Okay? But the real issue when it comes to reaching people for Christ has to do, who's the one? Who's the one? What do they look like? Where are they? And how do we go after them? And how do we embrace them when they get here? Well, all that's going on in my journey in the last 6 or 7 weeks, and it just kind of, boom, hit me. Lord, I think you've been trying to tell me for the last at least several weeks that I can do a better job shining the light, sowing the seed, and being an effective witness. I could just simply do a better job of that. I think most of you could probably join me in that need. Okay? Because we wouldn't be in the room if somebody had not been that person to us. And we've got to do a better job of being that person to others. I know that there's some in the room, because I know you, that are spiritually gifted with the gift of evangelism, and it's very comfortable with you. I mean, you can witness to a total stranger, family, friend, tree, dirt, it doesn't matter. Okay, you're just comfortable in doing that. Okay, God bless you, but the rest of us hate you in Jesus. No, we don't hate you. We envy you to some degree. But so I really felt like today, I'm still in this series, that I needed to address this, if not for you, for me. And I want to talk about really how can we be a better witness for Christ. And then in a minute we're going to make our way to Acts chapter 8 and Philip's encounter with the Ethiopian eunuch. But I want you to look on the screen or at your outline, and you'll see there's a picture. There's a picture. Well, let me give you this quote. This is really good with John R.W. Stott. We are to go as he went, to penetrate human society, to mix with unbelievers and fraternize with sinners. Does not one of the church's greatest failures lie here? We have disengaged too much. We have become a withdrawn community. We have become aloof instead of alongside. And he's right. And that was too true of me. So what I want to do is I want to show you this next picture, and it's on your outline there. It has helped me to remind myself that evangelism is a process. It is a process. And never has that process, I think, been more difficult. Because that process of evangelism, bringing people to the point of where they're at least encountered with the question, what are you going to do with Jesus, is affected by where someone is in their relationship with Christ, where they are in their relationship with God. Most of us in the room are, 50 plus, and we can go back and we've walked with Christ for a long time. And where people are culturally, spiritually, is radically different than where they were 25 and 30 years ago. Radically different. I know years ago, even after I came here years ago, we could go out on a visitation night or evangelism night. You could get into most communities. You could get into most homes. You could knock on doors. And almost, when you went into the den or the living room, if you looked around enough, and it might be on the table right in front of you, there was a family Bible. Okay, or you could look on the bookcase and you could see a Bible or two. Even though these folks may be unsaved, unchurched, what have you. But there was some religious, spiritual sensitivity and awareness. That's been long lost. If you look up on the screen, you look at the outline, if you go to the far right, the further you move to the right, the closer you get to God. See it? The further you move to the left, the farther you get from God. And what's happened to our culture is that it's moved left. And it is moving left. At a very fast pace. That's important because you can't engage and have the same conversations with lost people today as you could have 10, 20, 25, and 30 years ago. They're different. There's not a Bible on the table. There's not an interest in spiritual things. There's not even an awareness of spiritual things. We need to understand that in order to develop the right kind of spiritual conversations. And I've tried to give you a little bit of a picture here of far left, hostile, antagonistic, angry, argumentative about spiritual things. Okay? You can ask them, okay, do you have a relationship with Jesus? And they may spit in your face. Because they're just not even interested in that. And then if you move a little bit further right, they're not as hostile and angry, but they're just indifferent. They're just, I'll use this phrase, probably happy with their life. Just don't have a need for God. Not interested in God. Don't think about God. And those two groups, and again, this is obviously very fluid, but what do you do? How do you approach when you run into those kind of people? Okay, you have Thanksgiving family meal with one of those. You work with one of those. Okay, you run into one of those. Okay, it doesn't do any good to have them before spiritual laws. It doesn't do any good to ask them the 2 EE questions. It just simply doesn't. You're going to probably make them even more angry that you're one of the crazy Christians. I have found, I know it may not sound too spiritual, the only thing that I know you can do with those is pray. Okay? And I have said to those, okay, can I pray for you? Now, I can't tell you some of the answers are not really real nice. Okay? They're usually profanity laced. Okay? But they can't stop us from praying for them. Okay? And I think it's important, not in arrogance, to say, I'm going to pray for you. Now, they're probably going to tell you, don't waste your breath. Don't waste your time. Okay? When somebody is far left, indifferent, and hostile, that's the only thing that I know of that you can do. As you move toward the cross and toward the decision, you move into what I would call they're open, they're interested. I think this describes really more in our society than we're aware of. Our society is so intimidating. Most of these folks who are kind of got doubts and got questions that I would throw in the ignorant side, they're very careful who they allow in. Because they just don't trust it. Am I going to run into a hostile or to an indifferent if I share something that, I'm just having questions and having doubts. Is there a God? Is there a heaven? Is there an afterlife? And these are, I use the term ignorant, I don't mean, stupid, just ignorant of spiritual things, but becoming more and more aware. Maybe there's an emptiness, maybe they've lost a loved one, maybe they've had illness issues, maybe a crisis moment has occurred in their life, family, or work, okay, and they have begun to think about spiritual issues, but they don't understand them. Certainly you pray for them, but something that I have found very, very important, and that is, tell your story. Tell your story. Tell your story. And less about how you came to Christ, and more about what difference does it make. How has your relationship with Christ, whether it's been a year or 20 years, impacted your life? And if you know that there is a life need, lost a job, found out they had cancer, problem with their kids, whatever the case may be, maybe you have a common story and you can speak into that and how God has gotten you through that. But I think sharing, how God has impacted your life can really, really make a difference with those. Okay? And then last, as you kind of move toward the interested and the open, the seeking, really, really hungry and want to know more. If you haven't, I think it's a great time to invite them. Hey, I think I go to a great church. I would love to meet you Saturday night or Sunday morning. I can meet you in Welcome Center A and just sit with you. I just think you might enjoy it. And just be a friend and invite them and sit with them. And maybe afterwards, breakfast or lunch, what do you think? How do you feel? Do you think you'll come back? Just invite them to come. In that process of moving from far from God to closer to God, I can't put a timeline on that. I would say it tends to be more lengthy than short. And I think sometimes we get discouraged. We talked a little about that last week in the message. And then eventually all evangelism or witnessing eventually comes to the crisis moment. We'll see that in a minute in the text. What are you going to do with Jesus? What are you going to do? I encourage you, and I was really a little bit fascinated a couple of weeks ago when we talked about unashamed of the Lord and confessing Christ. I just, I didn't have enough faith in you. I just put out 50 copies of an assessment on your evangelism style. Remember that? Just put them down. I didn't put them on in your town. I didn't put them on the table over there. Okay? And gone. Every one of them. Every one of them. And sent out an email and made that as an attachment. So I don't know, I want to ask you, but that alone told me there's an interest in wanting to do better and have a little bit more comfort and to your approach to folks. I know. Listen, I know that it's not easy. Okay, now open your Bibles to Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8. Verse 26. I'm going to read these verses, kind of make a couple comments along the way. And then I'm just going to give you kind of 6 words. They're on your outline that I think if we understand them, one, it will give us a little bit of, I think, peace and comfort, and we won't feel so bad. Please understand, my goal today is not to make anybody feel guilty. My goal today is to help me and you just to do better. Just to do better. Okay? Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip. Philip first appeared back in that group of folks who were chosen in Acts 6 to serve the widows. Though the word's not used there, most go there for deacons. Tend to go to that passage, and Philip showed up as one of those 7 who were chosen. Look in Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8, and look at verse 1. And on that day, great persecution arose against the church in Jerusalem. They were all scattered through the region of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. The apostles stayed there. Devout men buried Stephen. Remember, he had just been killed, and made a great lamentation over him. But Saul laid waste to the church, and entering house after house, he dragged off men and women and committed them to prison. That's the Saul who would become Paul. Okay, this is where we are. Verse 4. Now those who were scattered went about preaching the word. Remember, the apostles stayed in Jerusalem. The word's getting out. Philip, this is the Philip we're fixing to read about, went down to a city of Samaria, down in the sense of altitude, because Samaria, you look at a map, Samaria is north of Israel, north of Jerusalem. It's north. You're going down, okay, but it's north. He's up in Samaria. And notice what happened. Went down to the city and proclaimed to them Christ. And the multitudes with one accord gave heed to what was said by Philip. When they heard him, they saw the signs which he did. For unclean spirits came out of many who were possessed. God was giving him, as it were, credentials, crying with a loud voice, and many who were paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was much joy in the city. So here is Philip and other Christians under great persecution for their faith, and yet there's a tremendous revival going on in Samaria. The angel of the Lord said to Philip, "Rise and go to the south." Now, if you look at a map of Israel, you've got Israel kind of right in the center, west of Jordan and east of the Mediterranean Sea. You got Samaria right above it. Then you go about 50 miles southwest over to what we know as the Gaza Strip today, Palestinian stronghold. That's Gaza. Okay, in between Jerusalem and Gaza is desert. Rise and go toward the south of the road that goes down to Jerusalem to Gaza. This is a desert place. And he rose and went. And there was an Ethiopian, a eunuch, a court official king, this queen of Ethiopians, who was in charge of all her treasure. He had come to Jerusalem to worship. So if you go back to that, Mark, can you go back to that relationship with God, look up there, okay? Just based on what you know right now about the eunuch, where would you put him? Ignorant, interested, just kind of somewhere in that area. I mean, he's gone from North Africa. I don't know how far it is from Ethiopia to Jerusalem to worship. So I'd say he's pretty interested. Okay, didn't get there on a plane. All right, and so it's a huge commitment. He's gone there, and obviously he is leaving and returning home. And he was returning, seated in his chariot, and he was reading the prophet Isaiah. And the Spirit said to Philip, "Go over and join his chariot." So Philip ran to him and heard him reading Isaiah, the prophet, and asked, "Do you understand what you're reading?" And he said, "How can I unless someone who guides me explains it to me?" And he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. Now the passage of Scripture that he was reading was this: like a sheep he was led to the slaughter, like a lamb before its shearer is silent, so he opens not his mouth. In his humiliation justice was denied him. Who can describe his generation? For his life is taken away from earth. The who and his and him, that's back to Isaiah 53, suffering servant passage referring to Christ. And the eunuch said to Philip, "About whom, I ask you, does the prophet say this? About himself or someone else?" Then Philip opened his mouth, and beginning with this scripture, he told him the good news about Jesus. And as they were going along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "See, here's water. What prevents me from being baptized?" And Philip said, "If you believe with all your heart, you may." The eunuch answered, "I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God." And he commanded the chariot to stop, and they both went down into the water, Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. And when they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord carried Philip away. And the eunuch saw him no more, and went on his way rejoicing. I think embedded in this encounter between a layman, deacon as it were, and by the way, Acts 21 said, it didn't say anything about his wife, it said that he had 4 daughters. But if I had 1 wife and 4 daughters, I'd probably look for a reason to get out of the house too. Just kidding. Just kidding. I don't know. Maybe I'm not kidding. I don't know. Okay. All right. So let me give you, this won't take long. Let me give you 6 words, okay, that you maybe fill in your bubbles. 6 words that I see here in the text that'll help us, I think, be more effective witnesses for Christ. Okay? The first is sensitivity. Sensitivity. Awareness. Mark, go to that next slide if you would. Okay? Maybe the next one. There you go. Sensitivity. Awareness. Just listen again. Now the angel of the Lord said to Philip. You think he was listening? Listen, I just gave you my personal testimony the last 6 weeks. Thought I was listening. But I wasn't listening. Okay? But he was listening. The angel of the Lord had spoken to him. And look down at verse 29. And the Spirit said to Philip. And then you go down to the very last verse. The Spirit of the Lord carried Philip away. Here was a Christian that walked with God and was sensitive and aware of the voice of the Spirit. And I think God speaks in a lot of different ways. But what captures me here is not in the various ways that God speaks by His Spirit or through an angel. What resonates with me is He was listening. He really expected God to guide him and to speak. I look back, especially years ago, and I look at even some Christians now, I feel like sometimes a lot of what we do in witnessing and evangelism is ill-timed and forced. forced, too aggressive. Now, understand here, if I'm talking about friends and neighbors and family and co-workers and those kind of things, and people that you're going to see with some degree of regularity in life, that's a whole different issue than some stranger you meet on a plane. Okay, I'm not really talking about the stranger on the plane at this point. I'm talking about the folks that are going to probably be in the flow of our lives here. And one of the things that we need to pray for, and I gave you the references to these in Ephesians and in Colossians and in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, is I have found myself for the first time praying more for opportunity. Praying more for God to create an opportunity and for me to be aware and sensitive of that opportunity. I'd like to tell you that's been a consistent prayer through the years, but it hasn't. But I want it to be now. That's one of the things God has shown me. Jimmy, even though you work in the world that you work in, you're out to lunch, you're here and you're there, you are running into lost people. But it's almost like you're not seeing it. It's almost like you're unaware. Almost like you're almost insulated from it. And you need to pray for opportunity and sensitivity and awareness to do that. And I think that's part of what's here. Now, what I find interesting, which is the pattern, by the way, in Acts, this experience did not take place on a Sunday morning in church. Most evangelistic witness encounters don't. They don't. They take place in the flow of life. Okay? Verses 27 to 30 is the next word is availability or maybe obedience. Availability or obedience. And notice in verse 27, and he arose and went. It didn't say and he made excuses. Or he looked for a reason not to go. It's one thing to hear. To pray for opportunity, to be sensitive, to be aware. But I will tell you, it just goes up several more notches when you're willing to step into that experience. And that may be the most difficult. That's obedience. That's stepping into it. It's easier to say, oh, it's just not a good time. I don't have enough time. It's easier to say, well, somebody else will do it. It is easier to do that. But he stepped into the situation. In fact, it's really interesting. So Philip ran to him. I can't tell you that I ever ran to a lost person. I run from them. Not always toward them. And Philip ran. David has said David has a few, I guess, coin phrases that he uses, and this is one of them. There's somebody waiting on the other side of your obedience. And that's what we see Philip doing here. Just listening to God and willing to go. And it wasn't an easy thing. You've got to remember, he's in the midst of revival and persecution. And God tells him to go to the desert. He doesn't even tell him he's going to see anybody. They just love it. And there was a eunuch. It's kind of like, Eureka, there was. There was. I mean, God made the opportunity. Now, these first two are really more pre-witness, pre-evangelism. They are maybe more heart issues. Just getting the heart ready to be the witness. And then picking up in verse 30. So Philip ran to him and heard him reading the prophet Isaiah. Who took the initiative? Philip. Especially the book of Acts, every time there's an encounter in the book of Acts, it's the believer or the believers, the apostles, that took the initiative. And he ran. And I love his approach. I think it's the best approach. It's not arguing. It's not telling. It's asking him a question. Do you understand what you're reading? Do you understand what you're reading? Part of it is my personality, part of it is my giftedness. Probably not the best approach in evangelism, but I tend to be a teller. Mike Kelsey over here, Mike's a teller. He's a proclaimer, okay? Just do that. If you do that, it'll be fine. Leave me alone. Okay? You just do that. Just listen to me. Do that. That's not a really good approach. Okay? No offense, Mike, but I'm offending you and me both. Okay? All right? It's questions are great. Because questions create curiosity. They create, I think, a sense of doubt. Because, again, I often think, after one of these kind of encounters, though I didn't see there was any fruit, I don't know what the Spirit of God is doing that night when he or she lays their head on the pillow. Because I know God's at work. Even when I can't see or feel it, God is at work. And God is more interested in that person saying yes to Jesus even than I am in them saying yes to Jesus. So I think I've given you some questions here that I think can help launch. Obviously, you don't ask all of them at once. What you're trying to do is to create a spiritual conversation, an on-ramp. Sometimes you have that if there's a crisis going on. Okay? I mean, if there's a crisis going on, a death in the family, health issues and what have you, obviously the great question is, John, how are you going to make it through this? How are you going to manage that? How are you going to manage it? So, here are just some potential starters. Why do you think the world is in such a mess? I don't know if anybody you talk to that won't agree that the world's a mess. Okay? What do you think's wrong? Now, you and I know the answer. Okay? But you don't jump on that. It's called sin. Okay? But I wouldn't blurt that out. We're all a bunch of dirty, rotten sinners. I probably wouldn't go there. Okay? But I'll tell you what. The person you're talking to who's got average intellect, they can come to that conclusion and never use the word. They are selfish. It's all about me. We live in a selfie world. You and I know the word of that is sin. But it's a great place to start because there is no salvation without the recognition of need. That's a sin issue. Here's another question. Did you grow up in church? Did you enjoy it? We have our world, and they're pretty equal statistically, is both an unchurched world, let me use America, is an unchurched America and a de-churched America. Unchurched, we understand. De-churched would refer to those who are now adults, who grew up in church, but through late high school, college, and early adult life, walked away. De-churched, dropped out, quit, gave up, maybe had a bad experience, or more often than not, it just didn't meet the need. Just didn't meet the need. And both of those would be descriptive of the world in which we live. So I think it's good to find out, did you grow up in church? Did you enjoy it? Why did you leave? If they're in that deep church, as it were, group. Third one, do you ever think about spiritual issues? Do you? Critical question, if you've heard of Jesus, who do you think He is? I like the afterlife question. Do you believe in afterlife? Because here's what I know about everyone that I have an encounter with. Like me, they're going to die. They're going to die. Let Jesus come, they're going to die. What do you think about that? What do you think about life after death? And then, if you've listened real well, if some of what you believe is not true, wouldn't you want to know? Now, here's an approach in dealing with people that I have found helpful, and it's so difficult for me to do because I'm a teller and proclaimer. I want to fix it. Is as you ask questions, how's your life going? Have you ever had a church background? Is do a lot of this. That's fascinating. That's interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more? I just find it really, really interesting. And here's Mark 5. Shut up. Okay. Shut upness is not one of my gifts. Okay? Because I know the answer. Shut up and listen. Okay, chances are you'll have another account. Okay. Leave them hungry. Leave them wondering. Leave them curious. Nothing wrong with that. Now, if they were to die in a car wreck, it's your fault. Just kidding. That's probably not going to happen. Okay. But just ask a lot of questions, okay? Don't force it. Okay? And then 31 to 34, he's so gracious. He's just so gracious and gentle and courteous and tactful and respectful. Let me give you a word that would really have described me more so years ago. Argumentative. Okay? I don't care if you go to hell, but I'm going to win the argument. I didn't say that, but that was probably what was going on. Forceful. Obnoxious. Offensive. Not that any Christian, Jesus-loving Christian would ever have those attitudes. Never. Just listen. And Paul said the gospel is offensive. He said it is offensive. But the messenger doesn't have to be. Just let the message stand on its own. But don't be offensive. Don't be pushy. And then in verse 35, here's the fifth word. Focus. Focus. You got to realize you are in a spiritual conversation. And remember the parable of the soils? There are the birds, there's the enemy. And as you scatter this soil, the enemy's trying to take it away, trying to buck it. Okay? The enemy can create all sorts of smoke screens, distractions, as you get into the conversation. It's an amazing thing when you get into a conversation about Jesus, how many distractions can all of a sudden take place. That's usually the work of the enemy. And what I find really interesting here is Philip had the fortitude and the intentionality. He stayed focused on the main issue, which is Jesus, who he was, and why he came, and why he needed. He just kept the conversation about Jesus. In our world, listen, it doesn't take long to get into rabbits of politics, and taxes, and abortion. I mean, don't go there, okay? I don't mean this to be harsh. We have a Center for Pregnancy, but I want to tell you something. We could, if we had the power as Christians to close every abortion clinic on the planet, people will still go to hell. Now, I'm for closing all of them. Okay? But what they need is Jesus. And you and I are the messenger. And we have to keep focused on that. Focused on that. I've asked you in here, in fact, I even shared it in the service last week, but why do you, going back to your story, I don't know if the unit shared, if Philip shared his story, didn't tell us, but I do believe in our culture, our story, because it's inarguable, our story is one of the most powerful tools for being a witness at God. And we need to be able to articulate, why do you follow Jesus? With little reference to the hope. Yes, the hope is real, but in this life, why do you follow Jesus? And then last, verses 36 to 39, he brought it to a response. He brought it to a decision. Now, that may not be the time and the place to do it. Maybe that's at another time, but eventually, there's the confrontation. What are you going to do with Jesus? Now that you understand, what are you going to do with Jesus? And we know he responded. He believed. God had been at work. He believed, preparing his heart. God goes before us, prepares the soil, preparing the heart. He said yes. He solidified that, as it were, publicly. I say publicly in baptism. I don't have any idea how many folks saw it. Philip may be by himself, and I don't know the entourage of the unit, but there were a few there. Certainly left a witness and testimony of those who were observing it. And then he went on his way rejoicing. Went on his way rejoicing. So there was that final, as it were, response. So sensitivity and availability, take the initiative, as hard as it is to step into that. Be gracious, ask a lot of questions, stay focused on Jesus, don't force it, don't be argumentative. And then at some point, it may not be in that encounter, maybe 3 encounters later, but at some point, when the time is right, the Holy Spirit will lead you, you ask the question, are you ready to do something about Jesus? Are you ready to do something about Jesus? If you look on your outline, I've given you some resources. Let me quickly, the first one, Right with God, is the one book more than any other book. It's old that I have given to people that I felt were interested and moving toward God. That book. It's an easy read by John Blatchard. It's a very old book. It's probably 40 years old. And still available, still in print. And that's the book that I give away to say, read this. Read this. I think another one that's not on here, it's as old as that one, is Billy Graham's old book, Peace with God. It's also an excellent book. The Share Jesus Without Fear is a great resource for us in becoming more effective. More Than a Carpenter is another great gift book to give to someone who is seeking. Becoming a Contagious Christian by Middleburg is excellent. One that's been very helpful to me is this book by Nick Pollard, Evangelism Made Slightly Less Difficult. Excellent book. Excellent book. And then I have 3 apps on my phone. I have the Jesus Film app. What's interesting about that is the Jesus Film is in a multitude of international languages. Okay? Those are all of that app. So I could be sitting at Starbucks and talk to somebody who's Brazilian and say, what's this? So it's really good. And then there's a life conversation guide of 3 circles. That's very simple to follow. And then there's a John 3:16. Those are all on my phone. All on my phone. Let me close. So I got a couple questions I want you to look at. We have about 27 conversations a day on the average. Now some of you have many more. And some of you have many less. That's the average. Okay? I just know for me, I need to try to move more of those when I'm sensitive, step into it, into more spiritual conversations. You have a circle of relationships that no one else has. I need to do a better job of capitalizing those. It's not that every time you get together with that person, it has to become a spiritual conversation. It doesn't. That'd probably be contrived if it does. I'm just simply saying, at least for me, I need to do a better job of making more of them a spiritual conversation. And that would be better than I usually do. More of them. And here's some ways that I think can help us in doing that. Okay? For next week, we're going to jump back in. Go to the assignment page, Mark. I don't remember if it was before that or after that. Here we go. We're going to jump back into Matthew 10. I want you to read Matthew 10, 34 through 37. Of all the demands that we've looked at, being like Christ, being unafraid of the world, unashamed, I will tell you now, when you read those 4 verses, it will jolt you. Because Jesus is entering the most precious and treasured realm that you and I know on this planet. Family. Family. Very, very sobering passage. And I want you to read that several times. And then here are a couple of questions around the table that you can wrestle with. how has today's lesson, and I hope it's encouraged, not discouraged, made you feel good, for you to be a better witness. And then before you close around the table, don't take a lot of time. Could you share the first name of two? One's okay. Unsaved people, you know. You don't have to, this is my cousin, Corey. You don't explain. John, Bill, Susie, Mary, okay? And call them by name, and then close your time praying for those people. Just first name. You don't have to get into how you're related to them or connected to them. Okay? All right. Father, thank you for our time together. Difficult subject, but one very needed. I mean, it's all about when you were lost now. And suppose we want to be like you, so we've got to become more about that as well. Blessed time and conversation. I pray we all leave, frankly, hopeful, not discouraged, not feeling guilty, just a little bit more hopeful. Maybe a nugget, a question, or something that came out of Philip's experience and encounter with the Ethiopian man that will help us. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. But we'll be more sensitive and more prayerful and more aware and more willing to be available and to step into those opportunities with great fear and trepidation. Trusting that you will guide what we say and that you will prepare the hearts and that you will use us to speak in the lives of others. In Jesus' name I pray.